They went on to say that the American system of checks and balances was no longer working. They accused unscrupulous people working in and with the government for taking advantage of American innocence and killing the American spirit. Jack implored the viewers to look at the beleaguered faces. He called them the disenfranchised, no longer having hope or faith in America. They were the victims of widespread violence caused by an unjust system. The narrators themselves said they were victims as well.
Just another Jack in jail in the crowd.
And this is why they had come to the Hill.
Our leaders are systematically destroying America. Beware to all of you who work and live in the capital and attempt to control the rest of us. You've been playing with all our lives. Now, we're going to play with yours. It's Jack and Jill's turn.
The film ended with striking images of masses of homeless people in Lafayette Square, right across from the White House. Then another poem, another warning rhyme. Jack and Jill came to the Hill on a grave and somber mission. You've made them mad. The time's so bad to be a politician. They're not serial killers, I said in a soft mumble, more for myself than anyone else. They're not pattern killers, not in the ordinary sense. They had some kind of overarching cause. Maybe this wasn't a game to them. It was war. On Wednesday morning, just 2 days after Chanel Green's murder, a second murdered child was found in Garfield Park, not far from the Sojourner Truth School. This time, the victim was a 7-year-old boy. Unless someone was copycatting the first murder, and that seemed highly unlikely to me, the killer couldn't have been Emmanuel Perez. Sampson and I had made a mistake. We had run down the wrong child molester. I pushed my way through the crowd to the dead child lying like a broken doll on an expanse of frost-covered grass. He had a short haircut like Damon's. Of course, I knew it wasn't Damon, but the effect was incredibly powerful. The sight took all the breath out of my chest and stomach and left me wheezing. I knelt down low over the murdered boy. The right side of the face had virtually been destroyed by the killer blow, just like Chanel's. Bright red blood was pooled under his head. The maniac likes to decimate beautiful things. It gave me an idea. Is the killer disfigured in some way himself? Physically? Emotionally? Maybe both. Dr. Cross? I know this boy, said a shaky voice. He's in our lower school. His name is Vernon Wheatley. I looked up and saw Mrs. Johnson. I may need to talk to you about the murders later, I said. We might have to talk to some of the children at school again. I won't do that unless we have to, though. They've been through enough. I'm sorry about Vernon Wheatley. Mrs. Johnson nodded, and she kept looking at me with incredibly penetrating eyes. I lowered my eyes and turned away from her. I had to. I went back to my note-taking. Why does he hate children so much? He had to have been badly abused himself, probably a male in his 20s, not too organized or careful. I had the thought that we would catch this one, but would we catch him soon enough? I checked and rechecked the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit data for anything that might possibly connect the 2 child murders to any others in Washington, or anywhere else for that matter. Then, I repeated almost the same process on Jack and Jill. If you want to understand the killer, look at his work. Jack and Jill were organized. The child killer was disorganized and sloppy. The cases couldn't have been more different. I still felt that I couldn't work 2 complex homicide cases like these at the same time, so I called in a few chips, favors I was owed inside the department. I needed an off-duty unit to help me with the Truth School investigation. I called in 4 badass homicide detectives from the 1st District, Sampson and Rakeem Powell included. These were probably the 4 best cops I knew in Washington. We all lived in Southeast and took the brutal murders personally. That night, I filled them all in on the case. I hoped I was wrong, but I was afraid there was a pattern killer working the neighborhood. Probably a serial killer of children. A killer in a rage, or damn close to it. He was devious and clever, but I also thought he was a beginner at this. He was sloppy. "He'll make a mistake," I told them. "I think we can get him soon, if we work together." I also told them there would be little or no help from the department. The commissioner was resisting any theory that the same person killed both children. Emmanuel Perez was still on the books as the killer of Chanel Green. The 5 of us were in. All wanted the gruesome case solved quickly, no matter what their other priority assignments. We were blood brothers. I worked the Jack and Jill case from 5 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Then I headed over to the Sojourner Truth School. Outside near the street, a chain-link fence with razor wire ran the perimeter of the schoolyard, but the inside was festive and brightly decorated. Unfortunately, 2 little babies from this school had been murdered in the last week. I turned the corner into the main office and saw Mrs. Johnson busily at work at an old-fashioned roll-top desk. She looked at peace, and I envied that. I finally said, "Hi there. It's Detective Alex Cross." She looked up and smiled. Her smile was warm and welcoming. "And what brings you to the principal's office, Detective Cross?" "I need to talk to you a little about Vernon Wheatley. I also wanted to get your okay to speak with some of the teachers again. Somebody might have seen something that would help us, even if they don't think they did." "Yes, I figured the same thing," she said. I liked everything I saw about Mrs. Johnson, but I pushed it out of my mind. I've done some questionable things in my life, but trying to fool with a married woman wasn't going to be one of them. "Are any of the teachers still here?" I asked. "I don't know this for sure, but I suspect the killer might have watched the school at some point." She shook her head. "Almost all of them are long gone by 4. They like to leave together if possible. Safety in numbers. And being here at 5 or so with a lot of unlocked doors doesn't make any kind of sense." It was what I had been thinking ever since I arrived at her office door. Faster than I would have thought possible, she slid a snub-nosed .38 special out of an open drawer. "I try to be prepared for whatever might happen," she said calmly. "And my husband is worried about my coming to work here." I told her good night. I couldn't help adding, "Please, be careful until this case is over, Mrs. Johnson." "It's Christine," she said, "and I will be careful. I promise. Thank you for stopping by." That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the 2 child murders, and Jack and Jill, but also about the principal at the Sojourner Truth School. She was wise and pretty. She could take care of herself. Mrs. Johnson. Christine.
What are the odds of it actually happening to me? Motion picture actor Michael Robinson thought it was absurd to be concerned about the maniac killers in Washington, so he didn't let it deter him from calling the VIP escort service for a little snack before bedtime. He had used the discreet, very expensive sex-for-hire service many times before while visiting D.C. There was a sharp rap at the door. Michael Robinson's date had arrived. "Hi, I'm Jasper," the handsome escort said. "It's nice to meet you, sir." Jack unleashed his best smile as he entered the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous hotel suite, shutting the door behind him. Michael Robinson was pleased with what he saw. This man was nearly perfect. "I'm a real fan," Jack said to the Hollywood star. "I've been following your career closely." Michael Robinson was already hard, and he was lubricated. Armed and dangerous, he called the ready state. He spoke in a near whisper that would have shocked male and female fans of his action romance films. "Oh, really, Jasper? That's always so nice for me to hear. It's kind of you to say, anyway." "I swear to God it's true," Sam Harrison continued his act. "My name is Jack, by the way," Sam Harrison said. "Jill is down in the lobby. Maybe you've heard of us?" Jack pulled out a Beretta with a silencer and aimed it between the actor's startled, deep blue eyes. He fired. It fit the pattern of Jack and Jill. People in high places.
One specific and particularly fascinating detail about the Jack and Jill murders was weighing heavily on my mind as I parked in front of the Willard Hotel and headed up to Michael Robinson's room. Lack of passion. The murders were so cold-blooded and efficient. The arrangement of the victims' bodies seemed to have been art-directed. The kinkiness of the scenes seemed too directed and orderly. This was the exact opposite of the Truth School murders, which were violent explosions of pent-up anger and pure rage. As a detective, if I had one basic rule about premeditated murders, it was this. They were almost always based on passion, extreme love, or hate, or greed, but not these killings. It kept bugging me. Why Michael Robinson? I wondered as I walked toward the room where he had been murdered. What sick and cruel game were these bizarre psychopaths playing? I spotted Kyle Craig once again.
The medical examiner figures Robinson's been a famous corpse since about midnight,
he said.
2 shots fired to his head, Alex. Close range, just like the others.
Heartless, I thought. No passion. No rage. I entered the living room of the suite. Michael Robinson's naked body was in a sitting position on the floor. It seemed as if the actor had been propped up to see anyone entering the room. And maybe that was the killer's idea, to see or be seen. I wondered. He was not a pretty sight. The blood had already pooled in the lowermost parts of his body. Another celebrity had been exposed, brought down to earth, punished for some real or imagined sin. What was the bizarre, complex message from Jack and Jill? That nobody was safe anymore? That they could come for anyone at any time? They knew how to get inside. There was another note left for us to find. Jack and Jill came to the hill to do some deadly deeds. They weren't far wrong to judge how long a bleeding liberal bleeds. There were some obvious connections to the Fitzpatrick and Sheehan murders. There was a tawdry, kinky side to all 3 killings. Each had been an execution, and most important so far, they were all bleeding liberals. They had been exposed for what they were. "Excuse me, you're Dr. Alex Cross, aren't you?" I turned to a tall, clean-cut man whose bearing was almost military. "Yes, I'm Alex Cross. I'm Jay Greer from the Secret Service, senior agent for the First Family Detail." I was about to get a much fuller understanding of why I had been put on the Jack and Jill investigation. "You're wanted at the White House," he said. "There's a problem we have to let you know about." "I'll bet it's a big problem, too," I said. "Yes," he said. "I'm afraid it is." I could hardly argue with the implicit command from on high. I dutifully accompanied Jay Greer up the street to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Despite the relative performance of some of the recent occupants, the White House continues to cast its spell over a lot of people, including me. We were quickly passed through the blue canopied guardhouse on West Executive Drive. "I'm sure you're curious as to why you've been asked to come," Agent Greer said. "You're aware that the FBI has never captured a single serial killer for all their expertise. We want you on the team." "What team is that?" I asked. "You'll see in a few seconds," he replied. "This is definitely the A-team." Half a dozen men and 2 women in business attire were gathered in the West Wing office of the White House Chief of Staff. I sensed a lot of tension in the room. I was introduced as the representative of the Washington Police. Welcome to the team, I thought. Say hello to the Dragon Slayer. The others at the table cordially introduced themselves. There were agents from the Secret Service and FBI, General Aidan Cornwall from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Army, Don Hamerman, the National Security Advisor, and the White House Chief of Staff, Michael Caine. From the CIA was the Inspector General, Gene Sterling. Her presence meant that a foreign power's involvement in Jack and Jill was being considered. The National Security Advisor called the gathering to order. Don Hamerman was a wiry, blond man in his mid-30s, who appeared to be tightly strung. "As you know," Hamerman began, "there have been 3 brutal celebrity murders in Washington in the past week. The stalkers call themselves Jack and Jill. Also, they seem to know what they're doing, haven't left us squat to work with. They appear to be signature or serial killers, though of a particularly